They tell you the moon is the next frontier, a natural stepping stone, a promised land of silver dust and boundless opportunity. Since the dawn of humanity, we have looked up at the night sky and projected our most romantic dreams onto that glowing orb. We see a gentle guardian, a beacon guiding travelers home, a stepping stone to the stars. But they never tell you what actually happens when the sun goes down up there. There is no romantic sunset. There is no atmosphere to scatter the fading rays of light into brilliant hues of orange, pink, and purple. The sky does not gently darken. It snaps off. Like a cosmic executioner pulling a lever, the light is simply terminated. And the exact moment that switch is flipped, you are officially imprisoned in a freezing black hole for 350 continuous hours. To understand the sheer violence of a lunar sunset, you must first understand why our biology is completely and utterly unprepared for it. For millions of years, human evolution has been cradled by Earth's thick, forgiving atmosphere. When our planet rotates away from the sun, the transition is merciful. The atmosphere bends the sunlight, stretching it out, giving our eyes and our brains precious hours to adjust to the encroaching dark. Twilight is a biological safety net. It whispers to our DNA that night is coming, allowing our pupils to dilate slowly, allowing our minds to prepare for sleep. But on the lunar surface, in the brutal vacuum of space, twilight does not exist. There is only the harsh, unfiltered glare of a brutal sun, and then there is absolute suffocating nothingness. The dividing line between day and night on the moon is called the terminator. On Earth, this line is a blurry, gentle gradient thousands of miles wide. On the moon, it is a razor-sharp blade moving across the surface at tremendous speed. If you stand directly on the equator of the moon and watch the terminator approach, you do not see a sunset. You see a wall of absolute pitch-black darkness rushing towards you, swallowing the cratered landscape piece by piece. It moves silently, completely devoid of the howling winds that would accompany such a massive weather front on a terrestrial planet. It simply arrives and the light is murdered. And then the blade passes over you. I used to think going blind was the most terrifying thing a human being could experience. But reality out here is far worse. Here you are not blind. The universe has simply deleted the world around you. Your eyes are wide open, desperate, searching for even a single photon to anchor your sense of reality, but there is absolutely nothing. The human brain, a supercomputer evolved to process millions of visual cues every single second, is suddenly starved of all input. It panics. The three-dimensional space you were just standing in instantly collapses into a flat, suffocating wall of ink pressed directly against the visor of your helmet. You raise your heavy, gloved hand in front of your face. You know it is there. You can feel the joints of the suit resisting your movement. You can feel the tension in your own muscles. But you cannot see it. You are entirely alone in a sensory void. Without the visual confirmation of the external world, your universe instantly shrinks to the interior of your extravehicular mobility unit. The majestic expanse of the lunar frontier is gone, replaced by a claustrophobic prison of plastics, metals, and recycled air. Because the external silence of the vacuum is absolute, the internal noises of your suit become deafeningly loud. You hear the frantic mechanical whirring of the primary life support system fans struggling to circulate oxygen. You hear the rhythmic synthetic hiss of the breathing regulators. But most terrifying of all, you hear yourself. Your own ragged breathing echoes inside the bubble of the helmet, like the desperate gasps of a trapped animal. The thudding of your own heart reverberates through your jawbone, a frantic biological drumbeat, protesting its placement in an environment that actively wants it dead. You are a fragile sack of water, calcium, and delicate neurological wiring hovering over an abyss of nothingness. This is the moment the true psychological horror of the lunar night begins to take root. Darkness on Earth is just an absence of sunlight. But darkness in the vacuum of space feels like a physical entity. It feels heavy. It feels like a giant drop of black ink has fallen into a weightless, frictionless ocean, expanding infinitely and swallowing the flickering, pathetic candle of human existence. You are entirely cut off. The Earth, if it happens to be below the horizon, offers no comforting blue glow. There are only the distant, cold, unblinking stars, and they offer no illumination, only a staggering reminder of the incomprehensible, crushing scale of the cosmos. The universe is not actively malicious. It is not trying to kill you. It is simply a machine of infinite indifference operating on physical laws that have no room for the fragile warmth of human biology. We built our rockets, we planted our flags, and we declared ourselves conquerors of the void. But standing here in the absolute zero-photon environment of the lunar night, that arrogance evaporates. You realize that humanity is a tiny, insignificant biological anomaly trespassing in a graveyard that has been dead for 4 billion years. As the first hour of the 350-hour night begins to tick away, a primal dread settles into your bones. Your brain, desperately trying to construct a reality out of zero data, begins to falter. The horizon has vanished. Up and down lose their meaning. Without a gravitational cue as strong as Earth's, and without any visual reference points, your inner ear struggles to orient you. Vertigo sets in. You feel as though you are falling, plummeting endlessly through a pitch-black shaft, even though your boots are firmly planted in the lunar dust. This is the first psychological toll of the Terminator's blade. The darkness here is not a blanket that covers you so you can sleep. It is an active erasure of your environment, a sensory deprivation tank on a planetary scale. You must survive this utter sensory starvation, not just for a few hours, but for 14 and a half Earth days. And as you stand there paralyzed by the sudden deletion of the world, a new, far more immediate threat begins to creep through the soles of your boots. The darkness has robbed you of your sight, but the sudden absence of solar radiation is about to unleash a physical nightmare upon the very atoms of your spacecraft. The countdown has started. Hour 1 has barely begun. You have 349 hours left, and the abyss has only just opened its jaws. But darkness is not the only enemy. Listen closely to the deafening silence of the vacuum outside, and then listen to the interior of your sanctuary. Can you hear the metal screaming? While your eyes are still desperately trying to adjust to the sudden, absolute deletion of the sun, a far more insidious and violent physical reaction is beginning to tear at the very fabric of your survival. On Earth, we are profoundly spoiled by our atmosphere. It is a thick, swirling blanket of gases that not only scatters light to give us beautiful sunsets, but also acts as a massive thermal reservoir. When the sun goes down on Earth, the air retains the heat of the day. The oceans hold the warmth. The temperature drops gradually, politely over a period of many hours. The atmosphere acts as a buffer, protecting our fragile biology from the unforgiving extremes of the universe. But the moon has no atmosphere. It has no blanket. It has no oceans to store thermal energy. It is a naked rock suspended in the absolute zero abyss of deep space. Therefore, the moment the Terminator line passes over you and the sunlight is extinguished, there is nothing left to hold the heat. It does not simply get chilly. The temperature plummets with a violent, catastrophic speed that defies human comprehension. During the lunar day, the surface bakes under the unfiltered glare of the sun, reaching a blistering 120 degrees Celsius. That is hotter than boiling water. But the second the sun disappears, that heat immediately begins to radiate away into the infinite heat sink of the cosmos. Within mere hours, the temperature violently crashes down to minus 130 degrees Celsius. It is a molecular shockwave. You retreat into your lunar module, the heavily engineered habitat designed to keep you alive. You strip off your bulky extravehicular suit and zip yourself into a thermal sleeping bag, hoping to find some rest as the first hours of the long night begin. But sleep is impossible. In the vacuum of space, there is no sound outside. There is no wind to rattle the windows. But inside your pressurized module, there is air. And that air carries the acoustic horror of extreme thermodynamics. The walls of your habitat are made of advanced aerospace materials, titanium, aluminum alloys, and complex polymers. During the 2 weeks of the lunar day, those materials expanded under the intense heat. Now plunged into the brutal cold of the lunar night, they are rapidly and violently contracting. And they do not contract silently. You lie there in the dim red glow of the emergency lights, and suddenly a sharp, deafening crack echoes through the cabin. It sounds like a gunshot. A few seconds later, a deep metallic groan shudders through the floorboards. Then a series of rapid pops, like someone taking a sledgehammer to the exterior hull. This is the sound of thermal contraction. The different metals and composites making up your habitat that are shrinking at different rates, fighting against the bolts, fighting against the welds, fighting against the very structural integrity of the ship. Every single pop, every single agonizing screech of metal rubbing against metal sends a spike of pure, unadulterated adrenaline straight into your heart. You know the engineering tolerance. You know the smartest minds on Earth designed this module to withstand massive temperature swings. But logic is utterly useless when you are lying in the dark 384,000 kilometers from home, listening to your only shelter physically tearing at its own seams. It is pure primal physical fear. You stare at the curved ceiling of the module, completely paralyzed by the noise. You realize with horrifying clarity just how fragile this entire endeavor really is. Your life, your entire existence depends entirely on microscopic beads of welded metal and thin rubber O-rings. If the thermal shock is just a fraction of a percent stronger than the engineers calculated, if a single microfracture develops in the crystalline structure of the titanium hull, the consequences will be instantaneous and fatal. Picture a solid block of glowing red-hot glass being pulled from a furnace and immediately dropped directly into a vat of boiling liquid nitrogen. Imagine the violent chaotic hiss, the catastrophic structural failure, the microscopic fractures spreading like a malignant spiderweb of pure destruction before the entire block shatters into a million pieces. That exact thermodynamic violence is happening to the microscopic structure of your habitat right now. If a weld snaps under this agonizing stress, if the temperature differential causes a seal around the airlock to warp even a millimeter, the pressurized atmosphere inside your cabin will violently and explosively vent out into the vacuum of space. You would not have time to put your suit back on. You would not have time to scream. The sudden explosive decompression would rupture your lungs in less than 3 seconds. The gases dissolved in your bloodstream would instantly boil out of solution, causing massive fatal embolisms throughout your entire circulatory system. You are separated from this horrific fate by a few millimeters of groaning, popping metal. Hour 2 passes. Hour 3 passes. The temperature outside is still dropping, plunging deeper into the negative hundreds. The symphony of cracking metal refuses to stop. It is a relentless psychological torture divine, a constant auditory reminder that the universe actively hates your presence here. Every time the hull bangs, you hold your breath, waiting to feel the sudden rush of wind that signals the end of your life. You try to close your eyes. You try to focus on the rhythmic hum of the life support computers, but the metal screams again louder this time. The cold is not just an absence of heat. In this environment, the cold is an active, aggressive predator. It is creeping through the lunar dust, climbing up the landing struts of your module, and pressing its freezing hands against the thin walls of your sanctuary, searching relentlessly for the weakest link in your armor. The arrogance of human engineering is being severely tested by the unforgiving, brutal reality of cosmic thermodynamics. And as you lie there shivering, not just from the dropping temperature inside the cabin, but from the sheer existential dread of your situation, you realize that you have only survived the first 24 hours. The night has barely begun. The structural integrity of your metal cocoon might hold, but the dropping temperature is about to awaken an entirely different microscopic nightmare waiting just outside the airlock. You think closing the heavy airlock door keeps you safe? You believe that isolating yourself behind inches of titanium and composite shielding makes you completely immune to the hostile vacuum outside. But you are tragically mistaken. The enemy did not wait for the sun to go down to attack you. They sneaked in during the bright, confident hours of the lunar day, hitching a ride right on your own boots. And now, as the temperature plummets and the absolute dark takes over, they are beginning their silent, relentless work of total destruction. To understand this new nightmare, you have to forget everything you know about dust on Earth. Terrestrial dust is soft. It has been tumbled by wind and rivers for billions of years, smoothed into harmless little spheres of dirt pollen and dead skin cells. But on the moon, there is no wind to smooth anything out. There is no water to erode the sharp edges. When a micrometeorite slams into the lunar surface at 40,000 kilometers per hour, it vaporizes the ancient rock and instantly freezes it into microscopic shards of jagged, volcanic glass. This is the regolith. It is not soil. It is an ocean of invisible, indestructible razor blades. During the long lunar day, the intense, unfiltered solar radiation relentlessly bombards these particles, charging them with a powerful, clinging static electricity. They stick to absolutely everything. They coated the heavy fabric of your extravehicular suit when you walked outside. They jammed themselves deep into the complex woven seams of your life support backpack. They clung onto the treads of your boots with an electrostatic grip that no brush could ever remove. And when you cycled the airlock and stepped into the module, you brought this microscopic nightmare inside with you. As the temperature outside crashes down to negative 130 degrees Celsius, the environmental control system inside your cabin works frantically to remove moisture and keep the electronics dry. The air becomes incredibly arid. And in this dry, statically charged environment, the regolith goes completely wild. As you pull off your suit in the cramped, dimly lit airlock, the friction causes the charged dust to lift off the fabric. It floats up into the microgravity of the cabin, totally invisible in the shadowy emergency lighting. You cannot see the threat, but you are about to feel it. You take a deep, exhausted breath, trying to calm your racing heart after listening to the terrifying thermal popping of the hull. Immediately, you notice a strange, pungent odor filling the cabin. It smells exactly like spent gunpowder. It smells like a recently fired weapon. That is not the smell of the moon itself. That is the smell of the broken chemical bonds of the lunar glass violently reacting with the warm moisture inside your nasal passages. And with that smell comes the pain. When these microscopic, jagged shards of electrified glass enter your respiratory system, they do not just irritate your throat like normal dust. They act like millions of tiny, merciless scalpels slashing deep into the delicate, moist pink tissue of your windpipe and your alveoli. You feel a sudden, sharp, burning tickle in the back of your throat. A dry, hacking cough begins to rack your chest, echoing loudly in the small, metallic room. You cough again, harder this time, your body instinctively trying to expel the foreign invaders. But you cannot cough out static electricity. The glass razors cling desperately to the walls of your lungs, cutting deeper with every violent spasm of your chest. You taste something warm, metallic, and heavy on your back of your tongue. It is your own blood. The regolith is actively shredding the internal lining of your respiratory system. This is what the Apollo astronauts called lunar hay fever, but out here in a sustained survival scenario, it is a death sentence. There is no immune response that can dissolve glass. Your white blood cells rush to the site of the microlacerations only to be sliced apart themselves by the jagged edges of the dust. Severe inflammation sets in almost immediately. The very oxygen you are desperately trying to breathe is turning into a weapon against your own biology. You are slowly, agonizingly drowning in a localized microscopic bloodbath inside your own chest, and the nearest functioning hospital is 384,000 kilometers away across an impassable freezing void. But your biological lungs are not the only things bleeding out in the dark. The module itself, your metal womb, is breathing this abrasive dust as well. The environmental control and life support system, the massive mechanical lungs of your habitat, is constantly sucking in the cabin air, scrubbing out the toxic carbon dioxide and pushing fresh oxygen back out. The airborne regolith is being pulled directly into the massive intake vents. Imagine millions of microscopic electrified crystal parasites swarming into the delicate, high-speed turbine blades of the air circulators. They coat the precision bearings. They grind against the rapidly spinning metal shafts with the devastating abrasive force of industrial sandpaper. In the dead, heavy silence between the terrifying thermal cracks of the contracting hull, you start to hear a new, far more sickening sound. It is a high-pitched, agonizing whine coming from behind the ventilation grates. It is the sound of the primary air scrubber motor screaming as it struggles against the catastrophic friction of the lunar dust. The pitch drops lower and lower, transforming into a deep, vibrating growl as the metal bearings begin to physically seize up. You stare horrified at the environmental control panel on the bulkhead. A cluster of yellow warning lights flickers to life, casting a sickly, jaundiced glow over your pale, sweating face. Primary airflow is steadily dropping. The static electricity has bonded the razor dust so tightly to the fine filtration meshes that the system is literally choking to death. Humanity engineered its way to the stars. We built towering, majestic rockets that harness the apocalyptic power of controlled explosions. We calculated orbital mechanics with absolute flawless mathematical perfection. Yet all of that monumental arrogance, of all of that multi-billion-dollar technology is currently being dismantled and brought to its absolute knees by dirt, by the very ground you came to conquer. You are trapped in a freezing metal box, coughing up blood into your hands, listening to the mechanical heart of your sanctuary slowly grind itself into a catastrophic failure. The absolute crushing isolation of the lunar night amplifies every single wet cough, every single grinding noise of the dying fan, turning your shelter into a torture chamber. You realize with sickening clarity that the moon does not need to use massive asteroid impacts or catastrophic solar flares to wipe you out. It only needs to use its dust. The regolith is a silent, patient, invisible assassin that has waited billions of years for a fragile, arrogant, biological organism to finally show up, take a deep breath, and inhale it. And as the yellow warning lights on the console slowly transition into a flashing, urgent red, you realize that your oxygen supply is about to become the least of your problems. The dying air scrubbers are pulling more and more electrical current to keep spinning, draining your limited batteries at a terrifying rate. The 72nd hour of the long night is approaching, and you are about to plunge headfirst into a massive energy crisis. The coughing fit finally subsides, leaving your throat feeling like it has been scrubbed with barbed wire and your chest aching with every shallow breath. You wipe the bloody saliva from your mouth with the back of a trembling, pale hand. But there is no time to dwell on the microscopic razor blades tearing apart your lungs because the relentless flashing red light on the main control panel demands your immediate terrified attention. The air scrubbers are violently protesting the regolith ingestion, their electric motors whining and grinding, pulling a massive, completely unsustainable amount of amperage just to keep spinning. And that sudden, unexpected power surge is the match that ignites the true devastating crisis of the lunar night. The energy famine has arrived. During the long, blistering 2 weeks of the lunar day, your massive solar arrays basked in the unfiltered, intense radiation of the sun. They drank deeply from the cosmic well, fully charging the colossal banks of lithium-ion batteries and fuel cells buried deep within the underbelly of your habitat module. You were awash in glorious unlimited power. You had the luxury of bright white daylight illumination inside the cabin, perfectly regulated temperatures, and all the scientific equipment humming happily along. But the moment the Terminator line passed over your base and plunged you into the abyss, those magnificent solar panels instantly transformed into useless dead metal sails extending out into the crushing blackness. They are completely, utterly blind. And now you are entirely dependent on whatever energy you manage to stockpile in the batteries. This is the terrifying math of survival in the dark. Every single watt of electricity is now a finite, rapidly dwindling drop of blood, and you are bleeding out fast. To understand the sheer scale of this energy drain, you have to remember the violent thermodynamic war raging outside your walls. The temperature out there is currently hovering around a staggering minus 130 degrees Celsius. It is a cold so profound, so absolute that it feels less like a temperature and more like a physical force trying to crush the module. The habitat is desperately trying to fight back, pumping massive amounts of electrical current into the complex network of thermal resistance heaters woven throughout the hull and the life support plumbing. If those heaters fail, or if they are even dialed down slightly, the water lines will freeze solid and burst within minutes, instantly terminating any chance of survival. But the choked, dying air scrubbers are now aggressively competing with those heaters for the exact same rapidly shrinking pool of battery power. You stare at the digital readout on the console. The battery reserve percentage is not just dropping, it is plummeting. It is a terrifying, mesmerizing freefall. 90%, 85%, 78%. And you are only in the 72nd hour of a 350-hour-long brutal night. The math does not lie, and the math says you are going to die. This is the moment the crushing reality of deep space resource management completely shatters any remaining illusions of human control. You are no longer an explorer. You are a desperate accountant of your own survival, balancing a ledger written entirely in watts, oxygen levels, and body heat. You reach out with a shaking, sweaty hand and flip open the clear plastic cover of the emergency power shedding protocol switch. It is a large, heavy, menacingly red toggle. You take one last deep breath of the dusty metallic air and you throw the switch. The result is immediate and terrifying. The bright, comforting white lights overhead instantly snap off, plunging the cabin into absolute suffocating darkness for a heart-stopping second before the low-power, dim red emergency LED strips flicker weakly to life. The humming of the scientific equipment dies completely. The communication arrays shut down, severing your only remaining link to Earth. The habitat module instantly feels like a tomb. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is the sudden, chilling silence. You have just shut down the secondary heating loops in the outer compartments to save power for the core life support systems. The temperature inside the main cabin begins to drop almost immediately. You can physically feel the heavy, oppressive cold creeping through the bulkheads, radiating from the floorboards, sinking its icy teeth into the back of your neck. You zip your thermal sleeping bag all the way up to your chin, pulling your knees tightly to your chest in a desperate, primitive attempt to conserve your own body heat. You are shivering violently now, your teeth chattering uncontrollably in the dim blood-red light. The majestic dream of conquering the stars has been violently reduced to this pathetic, freezing huddle in a dark metallic box. The psychological weight of this decision is crushing. You are forcing yourself to endure freezing temperatures, forcing yourself to breathe air that is thick with the metallic stench of static regolith, just to squeeze a few more hours out of the dying batteries. The module has become a submarine stranded at the bottom of a frozen, lightless ocean, slowly losing power, slowly filling with poison, and entirely cut off from the rest of the human race. You stare at the glowing red numbers on the battery monitor. They are dropping slower now, but they are still dropping. The agonizing compromise you just made only bought you a little more time. It did not solve the fundamental, horrifying reality of your situation. You are still trapped in the dark. The cold is still pressing against the hull. The air scrubbers are still grinding and whining, spitting fine bloody dust into your lungs with every struggling revolution. And as the 150th hour of the long night slowly approaches, the sheer crushing isolation of this freezing, sensory-deprived environment begins to attack the very last line of defense you have left. The power crisis was a physical threat, but the absolute crushing silence of the red-lit tomb is about to trigger a catastrophic collapse of your own mind. The darkness is not just outside anymore. It is seeping into your brain, and the hallucinations are about to begin. You are now entering the 150th hour of the lunar night. The physical cold is agonizing, and the air you breathe is a metallic, dusty poison, but those are merely physical tortures. The true absolute horror of this environment is only just beginning to unfold within the fragile enclosed architecture of your own skull. You have spent nearly a week trapped inside a freezing, dimly lit metallic cylinder. You have shut down all non-essential power, plunging the habitat into a permanent, blood-red twilight. But the most devastating loss is not the light. It is the sound. It is the movement. It is the total crushing absence of any dynamic sensory input from the outside world. On Earth, even in the deepest, darkest night, you are never truly in a sensory void. The wind rustles the leaves outside your window. A distant car engine rumbles down the street. The floorboards creak as the house settles. The air currents brush against your skin. Your brain is a hyperactive, data-hungry supercomputer that evolved over millions of years to constantly process a continuous, chaotic stream of millions of sensory signals every single second. It thrives on this data. It uses this constant flow of information to anchor you to reality, to define the boundary between what is inside your head and what is outside of it. But the vacuum of space provides absolutely nothing. The lunar surface is a dead silent graveyard. There is no wind, there is no tectonic shifting, there is no atmospheric pressure to carry an acoustic wave. The silence outside the hull of your module is so profound, so absolute, that it transcends mere quiet and becomes a physical weight pressing against your eardrums. Inside the cabin, the only sounds left are the rhythmic dying wheeze of the choked air, scrubber bay, the sluggish hum of the battery coolant pumps, and the frantic echoing thud of your own heartbeat. And this is exactly when the human brain, starved of the chaotic data it desperately needs to survive, begins to violently turn on itself. When you strip away all external stimuli, the brain refuses to simply sit idle. If it cannot receive reality from the outside, it will forcibly manufacture its own reality from the inside. This is the terrifying biological mechanism of extreme sensory deprivation. You are lying perfectly still in your thermal sleeping bag, staring up at the curved, red-lit titanium ceiling. Your eyes are wide open, but the monotonous, static environment offers them nothing to focus on. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the shadows lurking in the corners of the module begin to shift. You blink, trying to clear your vision, but the red emergency lights seem to pulse and stretch. You stare at a bundle of insulated wiring running along the bulkhead, and suddenly the cables appear to twist and slither like a nest of dormant serpents. Your rational mind screams that it is just a trick of the dim light, but your primal, primitive brain is absolutely convinced that something is moving in the dark with you. The visual hallucinations are deeply unsettling, but the auditory hallucinations are what truly shatter your sanity. The monotonous grinding whine of the dying air scrubber has been drilling into your ears for days. It is a constant mechanical drone. But as the sensory starvation deepens, your brain starts searching for patterns within that random mechanical noise. It starts trying to decode a language that does not exist. You are drifting in a state of exhausted half-sleep when you hear it. A voice. It is faint, muffled, barely a whisper beneath the grinding of the fan blades, but it is undeniably human. Your eyes snap open, your heart hammering against your ribs. You hold your breath, straining to listen. There it is again, a low, rhythmic muttering coming from just outside the heavy titanium door of the airlock. It sounds exactly like someone or something is standing out there on the freezing lunar surface, calmly reciting a string of incomprehensible words directly into the external communications microphone. But the communications array is completely powered down. There is no one outside. There is nothing outside but rocks, dust, and a deadly vacuum. Yet the whispering continues, growing slightly louder, slightly more insistent. It is your own desperate brain pulling old fragmented memories of human conversation and projecting them over the ambient noise of the machinery. But knowing it is an hallucination does not stop the sheer paralyzing terror of hearing it. The line between your internal subconscious and the external physical world has completely dissolved. You are trapped in a claustrophobic, freezing metal box, and your mind has essentially invited a phantom crew to join you. Paranoia, the ultimate apex predator of the isolated mind, begins to sink its venomous fangs into your psyche. If you are part of a crew, the agonizingly close quarters and the crushing stress of the environment magnify every tiny conflict into a massive paranoid delusion. You look at your fellow astronaut sleeping in the bunk across from you, bathed in the sinister red glow, and suddenly their face seems twisted, alien, entirely untrustworthy. You begin to obsessively monitor their breathing, convinced that they are secretly plotting to steal the remaining oxygen or hoard the dwindling battery power. The module is entirely too small for two minds that are actively fracturing. But if you are utterly alone, the paranoia takes an even darker, more existential turn. You become acutely, terrifyingly aware of the vast, crushing emptiness surrounding your tiny metal bubble. You feel the heavy, invisible gaze of the universe pressing down on you. It is the profound, chilling sensation of being watched by an entity that is so massive, so ancient, and so entirely indifferent to your suffering that your human mind cannot even begin to comprehend it. Imagine floating alone in the middle of a pitch-black, bottomless ocean, completely paralyzed, looking down into the inky depths and slowly realizing that another face is looking back up at you, smiling a cold, unblinking smile. That is the psychological abyss of the lunar night. You are completely untethered from reality, drowning in a terrifying ocean of your own manufactured nightmares. You try to close your eyes, to shut out the shifting shadows. You press your hands over your ears to block out the phantom whispers, but there is absolutely no escape. The horror is coming from inside the house. You are entirely at the mercy of a nervous system that is collapsing under the weight of infinite silence. And just when you think you have reached the absolute lowest depths of human suffering, just when you believe your mind cannot possibly endure another second of this torturous, hallucinatory purgatory, the universe decides to remind you that the shadows are not the only invisible things in the dark. While your brain is busy fighting ghosts, a very real, completely invisible, and utterly devastating physical storm is silently passing straight through the thick titanium walls of your sanctuary, aiming directly for your fragile, exposed DNA. The 220th hour is approaching, and the cosmic radiation is about to unleash its silent slaughter. You are trapped in the suffocating darkness of your failing habitat module, desperately fighting off the phantom whispers and the creeping paranoia that your sensory-starved brain is manufacturing. The cold is a constant physical agony pressing against the walls, and the dying air scrubber continues its metallic death rattle. You tell yourself that if you can just keep your eyes closed, if you can just hold on to your sanity and conserve the remaining battery power, you might actually survive this 2-week-long nightmare. But the lunar night is a master of deception. The darkness tricks you into believing that the space around you is empty. It lulls you into a false sense of security, whispering that because you cannot see anything, there is nothing there to hurt you. But reality is infinitely more violent. While you lie shivering in your thermal sleeping bag, a relentless, completely invisible, and utterly devastating storm is passing straight through the thick titanium walls of your sanctuary, aiming directly for the fragile, twisting ladders of your biological code. You are currently enduring the 220th hour of the night, and you are standing completely naked in the middle of a torrential downpour of galactic cosmic rays. To understand the sheer scale of this invisible slaughter, you must look far beyond the freezing rock you are currently trapped on. On Earth, humanity is sheltered within an invisible, impenetrable fortress. Our planet generates a massive magnetic field, the magnetosphere, which acts as a colossal deflector shield against the lethal radiation of deep space. Furthermore, we are wrapped in a thick atmospheric blanket that absorbs whatever high-energy particles manage to slip past the magnetic defenses. We live our entire lives completely oblivious to the apocalyptic radioactive fury of the universe. But the moon has no magnetic field. It has no atmosphere. It is a dead, naked target constantly bombarded by the most energetic and destructive particles ever created since the dawn of time. These are not just simple ultraviolet rays from our local sun. The true assassins of the deep night are galactic cosmic rays. These are the heavy nuclei of atoms stripped of their electrons and accelerated to nearly the speed of light by the cataclysmic universe, shattering explosions of dying stars and distant supernovas, millions of light years away. They have traveled through the freezing, frictionless void for millennia, maintaining their staggering kinetic energy until this exact moment when they violently intersect with your precise location. You believe the heavy aerospace-grade metals of your lunar module are protecting you. You believe the layers of composite shielding are keeping the universe at bay. But to a galactic cosmic ray, traveling at 99% the speed of light, Your thick titanium walls are nothing more than a faint mist. These heavy ions smash through the exterior hull of your habitat without slowing down. They blast right through the internal bulkheads. They tear through the fabric of your sleeping bag. And then they hit you. You do not feel it. There is no pain. There is no sudden impact. Your nervous system did not evolve to detect the microscopic subatomic trauma of ionizing radiation. But on a cellular level, a massacre of unimaginable proportions is taking place inside your body every single second you remain on the lunar surface. Imagine a densely packed, intricately organized library containing every single blueprint required to keep you alive. That is your DNA. Now imagine a fleet of microscopic freight trains plowing through the walls of that library at the speed of light, instantly vaporizing shelves, shredding the blueprints, and leaving a chaotic trail of shattered chemical bonds and burning genetic debris in their wake. That is what a galactic cosmic ray does to a human cell. As you lie in the dark, desperately trying to ignore the phantom voices of your sensory deprivation, millions of your cells are silently screaming. The high-energy particles are ionizing the water molecules in your tissue, creating highly reactive free radicals that aggressively attack your cellular machinery. They are snapping the double helix structure of your DNA right down the middle. Your biological repair mechanisms, evolved to handle the gentle, occasional radiation of Earth, are completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume and ferocity of the cosmic bombardment. You are slowly, silently being irradiated from the inside out. But the universe is not content to simply murder you in secret. It insists on forcing you to watch the process. As the 250th hour drags on, the psychological torture of the isolation is suddenly interrupted by a terrifying physiological phenomenon. You have your eyes tightly squeezed shut, desperate for sleep, desperate for an escape from the crushing red twilight of the cabin. But suddenly, a brilliant blinding streak of pure white light flashes vividly across your field of vision. A second later, a spectacular blooming starburst of blue energy detonates directly behind your eyelids. Your eyes snap open in a panic. You look around the dim freezing module expecting to see a sparking wire or a catastrophic electrical fire. But there is only the steady, menacing red glow of the emergency LEDs. You close your eyes again, your heart pounding. A few minutes pass. Then another violent streak of light slashes across your vision, followed by a series of rapid pulsating flashes. You are not hallucinating. This is not the sensory deprivation playing tricks on your exhausted mind. This is a very real, scientifically documented horror known as the cosmic ray visual phenomenon. The high-energy particles from distant supernovas are literally smashing directly through the physical structure of your skull. They are passing straight through the aqueous humor of your eyeballs. As these particles travel faster than the speed of light in water, they generate a microscopic shockwave of electromagnetic radiation known as Cherenkov radiation. The flashes of light you are seeing are the actual physical shockwaves of cosmic bullets detonating inside the soft tissue of your own retinas. The enemy is no longer just outside the hull. The enemy has bypassed every single physical and psychological defense you possess, and it is currently staging a fireworks display inside your optic nerve. You cannot look away. You cannot close your eyes to stop it. The universe has forcefully wedged itself inside your head, forcing you to constantly witness the exact mechanism of your own biological destruction. Every time you see a flash, you know another strand of your genetic code has been violently severed. The radiation does not discriminate. It passes through your vital organs, your heart, your liver, and the delicate neurological pathways of your brain. You begin to wonder if the phantom whispers you were hearing earlier were truly just psychological hallucinations, or if they were the early symptoms of cosmic rays physically destroying the cognitive centers of your cerebral cortex. The boundary between madness and actual brain damage blurs entirely. You try to calculate the cumulative dose you are receiving, trying to remember the safe limits of sieverts and grays from your training manuals, but the numbers lose all meaning when you are utterly defenseless. There is no lead bunker to hide in. There is no water shield thick enough to slow down the heavier ions. The realization washes over you like a tide of freezing water. Your body, the masterpiece of millions of years of evolutionary refinement on a warm, watery planet, is fundamentally incompatible with the wider universe. We were built for the cradle, not the abyss. You lie there paralyzed, your breathing shallow and ragged, watching the silent, beautiful, and utterly lethal cosmic light show exploding behind your eyelids. The sheer existential dread of the situation threatens to crush whatever tiny fragment of sanity you have left. You are a fragile carbon-based organism being slowly microwaved by the death throes of ancient stars trapped in a freezing, choking metal box that is rapidly running out of power. And as the 280th hour of the night approaches, you realize that the relentless cold and the abrasive dust are about to trigger a completely new catastrophic failure. You have been so focused on your own biological breakdown that you have ignored the mechanical breakdown of your only shelter. Humanity places absolute blind faith in its machines, but in the brutal depths of a minus 130-degree vacuum, the fundamental laws of physics are about to violently betray your engineering. You are trapped in the 280th hour of the lunar night. Your body is being silently riddled by invisible cosmic bullets, your lungs are bleeding from microscopic glass shards, and your mind is teetering on the absolute edge of a hallucinatory abyss. But as you lie shivering in the blood-red gloom of your dying habitat module, the universe prepares to deliver its most agonizing, humiliating blow. It is going to strip away the very last thing you believe in. Humanity places an absolute, almost religious faith in its engineering. We worship the perfection of machine titanium, the flawless logic of redundancy systems, and the invincibility of our complex equations. We believe that if we build the walls thick enough and calculate the tolerances precisely enough, our machines will save us from the abyss. But out here, plunging deep into a sustained thermal nightmare of minus 130 degrees Celsius, the fundamental laws of physics will violently betray every single one of those equations. You are about to witness the horrifying, catastrophic death of your mechanical god. The crisis begins not with an explosion, but with a sharp, sickening metallic snap that echoes loudly over the groaning hum of the failing life support systems. It is a sound that instantly freezes the blood in your veins, plunging you into a state of primal wide-awake terror. A high-pitched, piercing alarm suddenly begins a shriek from the environmental control panel, its urgent red strobe light cutting fiercely through the shadows of the cabin. A critical warning message flashes on the main screen. There is a microscopic pressure leak in the secondary oxygen recycling loop. It is a slow, steady hemorrhage of your most precious resource directly into the vacuum of space. The automated electronic safety valves, starved of sufficient battery power and choking on the abrasive lunar dust, have completely failed to isolate the breach. Your survival now depends entirely on a manual override. You must drag your freezing, exhausted body out of the thermal sleeping bag, cross the freezing metal floor of the cabin, and physically turn the heavy red emergency shutoff valve located on the primary bulkhead. You unzip the bag, and the brutal sub-zero air of the cabin instantly hits your skin like a wall of solid ice. Every muscle in your body screams in protest as you stumble across the deck, your breath pluming in thick, white clouds of condensation in the dim light. You reach the bulkhead. The heavy steel wheel of the emergency valve is right in front of you, painted in a stark, desperate red. It is a simple, primitive mechanical device, a trusted piece of human technology that has been used on ships and submarines for centuries. You wrap your trembling, freezing fingers around the thick metal rim, brace your boots against the floorboards, and pull with every ounce of remaining strength you possess in your starved, exhausted body. Nothing happens. The valve does not turn. It does not even budge a fraction of a millimeter. You readjust your grip, gasping for air, the metallic dust scraping painfully down your throat, and you pull again, throwing your entire body weight into the motion. Still nothing. A cold, suffocating wave of pure panic washes over you as the horrifying reality of extreme low-temperature physics begins to set in. You assume the machine would simply function as it always does on Earth. But you've forgotten about the lubricants. Every single moving part in this multi-billion-dollar facility, every gear, every bearing, and the heavy threaded stem of this emergency valve relies on specialized aerospace grease to prevent the metal surfaces from grinding together. The engineers back in Houston formulated that synthetic grease to withstand incredibly low temperatures. But they engineered it for the calculated averages, not for a sustained, brutal, localized deep freeze caused by the catastrophic failure of the habitat's secondary heating loops. In the agonizing, freezing darkness of this specific bulkhead, that highly advanced synthetic lubricant has undergone a terrifying phase change. It has completely lost its viscosity. It has hardened into a solid, unyielding block of chemical cement, effectively welding the internal threads of the valve permanently shut. Your own life-saving mechanism has trapped itself. Desperation takes over. The shrieking alarm is drilling into your skull, a constant reminder that your oxygen is silently venting out into the void. You cannot accept that a simple frozen thread is going to kill you. You look around frantically and grab a heavy solid steel wrench from a nearby emergency toolkit. If the valve will not turn by hand, you will force it. You fit the heavy wrench over the spokes of the red wheel lock, your arms and heave with a desperate, animalistic surge of adrenaline. This is the exact moment the universe reveals the ultimate humiliating punchline of cold embrittlement. You believe that steel and titanium are permanent, indestructible materials. But temperature dictates the very atomic structure of matter. When metals are plunged into extreme cryogenic temperatures for hundreds of hours, the microscopic crystalline lattice that gives them their legendary strength and flexibility begins to fundamentally alter. The metal physically shrinks, binding the atoms so tightly together that they can no longer slide past one another under stress. The material completely loses its elasticity. It ceases to be a tough, resilient metal. It becomes as brittle and fragile as a cheap pane of window glass. As you put your entire body weight into the heavy steel wrench, you do not feel the valve begin to turn. Instead, you feel a sickening, sudden lack of resistance. You hear an incredibly loud, sharp crack like a dry tree branch snapping in half right next to your ear. The heavy red steel wheel of the emergency valve shatters completely. A jagged, heavy chunk of the brittle metal breaks off entirely, sending you crashing backward onto the freezing floor of the module, the heavy wrench clattering loudly into the corner. You lie there on your back, staring blankly at the jagged, broken stump of the valve stem sticking out of the bulkhead. Your hand is still clutching the broken piece of the red wheel. The alarm continues to shriek its piercing, repetitive warning. Your oxygen is still leaking, but there is nothing left to turn. There is nothing left to fix. The absolute crushing realization of your utter helplessness descends upon you like a physical weight. You are thousands of miles away from any human being, trapped in a pitch-black, freezing vacuum holding a shattered piece of your own technology. This is not a heroic death in the fiery exhaust of a rocket engine or a brave sacrifice on the edge of a new frontier. This is a slow, humiliating execution by the simple, indifferent laws of thermodynamics. You realize that humanity's grand, arrogant expansion into the cosmos is nothing more than a fragile illusion supported by a thin web of equations, and the universe only needs to lower the temperature a few degrees to snap that web entirely. We are nothing but arrogant apes who built a very complicated tin can, and the cold void is crushing it without even noticing our presence. You drop the broken piece of metal. It hits the floorboard with a dull, pathetic thud. The energy crisis, the suffocating regolith dust, the invisible cosmic rays, and the psychological torture of the isolation were all just the prelude. The shattering of the valve represents the final irreversible collapse of your survival infrastructure. The habitat module is no longer a shelter. It is officially a casket slowly bleeding its remaining air into the dark. The 320th hour is upon you, and as the red emergency lights flicker and dim even further, you are about to enter the absolute lowest, most desperate depth of human suffering. The machines are dead. The physics have betrayed you. Now there is nothing left but the agonizing, suffocating reality of your own failing biology as the air begins to turn thick and poisonous. Ngon ngu viet ban tingain, the 320th hour of the lunar night descends upon you, not as a measure of time, but as a physical, suffocating weight. You are lying on the freezing floor plates where you fell after the emergency valve shattered in your hands. The sharp, jagged piece of brittle red metal is still resting inches from your face, a mocking monument to the total failure of human ingenuity. The piercing shriek of the pressure alarm has finally died, not because the leak was fixed, but because the audio warning system simply ran out of battery power. The module is now entombed in a haunting, profound silence, broken only by the ragged, wet rasp of your own breathing. But even your breathing is changing. The air inside the cabin is no longer the crisp, sterile mixture of nitrogen and oxygen it was 2 weeks ago. It is turning into a thick, invisible poison. The breached secondary loop is slowly bleeding your life support out into the vacuum, but that is only half the execution. The dying air scrubbers, choked by the relentless, abrasive glass of the lunar regolith, have completely stopped filtering the atmosphere. With every exhalation, you are pumping warm, toxic carbon dioxide into the rapidly shrinking volume of the cabin. And the room is too small, the power is too low, and the machinery is too broken to scrub it away. You are slowly, deliberately suffocating on your own biological exhaust. This is the physiological nightmare of hypercapnia. It does not feel like holding your breath. It feels like a fire is being slowly kindled in the deepest, most delicate branches of your lungs. The human body is an incredibly resilient machine, but it possesses a deeply ingrained primal panic switch when carbon dioxide levels begin to rise in the bloodstream. You try to take a deep, calming breath, but the air feels heavy, dense, and utterly useless. Your diaphragm spasms uncontrollably, forcing your chest to heave in rapid, shallow gasps. A dull, agonizing throb begins to pound at the base of your skull, spreading forward behind your eyes like a tightening iron vise. The dim blood-red emergency lights of the cabin seem to smear and blur as your retinas are starved of oxygenated blood. You drag your heavy, lethargic body back into the thermal sleeping bag, your muscles screaming in agonizing protest, burning with lactic acid even though you are barely moving. Every single movement requires a monumental Herculean effort. You feel as though you are trying to swim through an ocean of cold, thick molasses. You look at the digital mission clock mounted on the primary console. The glowing red numbers seem to float in the dark. 330 hours. 335 hours. You are so agonizingly close to the dawn. The sun, that massive, glorious thermonuclear furnace that has been hidden behind the curvature of this dead rock for 14 days, is slowly creeping back toward the horizon. But the universe does not care about your biological schedule. The universe does not deal in dramatic rescues or last-minute reprieves at the end of a countdown. The vacuum of space is an entirely indifferent, unfeeling entity. It does not hate you. It does not want to punish you for your arrogance. It simply does not register your existence at all. This is the ultimate crushing existential realization of the late lunar night. You are the apex predator of a beautiful, vibrant blue planet. You are the inheritor of millions of years of evolutionary triumph, possessing a brain capable of composing symphonies, splitting the atom, and charting the courses of distant galaxies. Yet here you are, reduced to a shivering, suffocating organism, curled into a fetal position in a dark, freezing metal box, begging an empty sky for a single breath of clean air. Your massive intellect is utterly useless against the simple brute force mechanics of a vacuum. Your will to survive, that raging, burning desire to live that has defined humanity since we first crawled out of the oceans, means absolutely nothing out here. The moon is a silent, ancient graveyard that has watched entire star systems be born and die. It will not shed a single tear when your microscopic carbon-based life flickers out. The station is flooded in a dying, pulsating red light, a visual representation of your own failing cardiovascular system. The temperature inside the sleeping bag is plummeting as your core body heat finally surrenders to the minus 130-degree onslaught outside. Your extremities are numb. Your fingers and toes have lost all sensation, the blood desperately retreating to your vital organs in a last futile defensive maneuver. As the carbon dioxide toxicity deepens, the violent panic of suffocation slowly, terrifyingly begins to give way to a strange narcotic apathy. The agonizing burning in your lungs dulls into a heavy, warm numbness. The throbbing headache softens into a thick, foggy confusion. Your brain, heavily starved of oxygen, is beginning to shut down its higher cognitive functions. You no longer feel the abrasive bite of the regolith dust in your throat. You no longer care about the shattered valve or the dying batteries. The hallucinations return, but they are no longer the terrifying, paranoid phantoms of the deep night. They are gentle, tragic illusions born of a dying mind. You smell the crisp, salty air of an earth ocean. You feel the warm, golden sunlight of a summer afternoon on your skin. You hear the distant, comforting sound of rain falling on a wooden roof. Your mind is building a beautiful, comfortable room for you to die, and projecting a desperate montage of the home you will never see again across the inside of your heavy eyelids. You are a single dying ember at the bottom of a frozen black canyon, slowly being buried under an eternal blizzard of cosmic indifference. The 349th hour ticks over on the console. You are hovering precisely on the agonizing, razor-thin boundary between life and death, your chest barely rising, your pulse a weak, fluttering thread. And it is in this exact moment of total physical and psychological surrender, when you have finally accepted the absolute certainty of your own demise, that the darkest, most cruel twist of the entire lunar cycle prepares to reveal itself. The dawn is finally coming. But salvation is an absolute lie. The 350th hour arrives not with a triumphant fanfare, but with the silent, indifferent turning of celestial gears. You are lying in the suffocating dark, your mind drifting in a hazy, oxygen-starved purgatory, waiting for the final merciful shutdown of your biological systems. But the universe is not finished with you yet. The Terminator line, that massive, invisible blade of shadow that plunged you into this freezing hell 14 days ago, has finally completed its slow, agonizing crawl around the circumference of the moon. The first ray of light finally touches your retinas. You have survived the abyss, but the joy dies in your throat the exact moment you realize this brutal, crushing truth. Dawn is not a rescue. Dawn is an absolute terrifying lie. On Earth, a sunrise is a gentle, forgiving process. The thick atmosphere scatters the approaching sunlight, painting the horizon in soft, beautiful gradients of purple and gold, gently warming the soil and slowly waking the biosphere from its slumber. But out here, staring through the thick quartz window of your dying module, there is no atmospheric filter. There is no gentle awakening. The transition from absolute freezing blackness to blinding thermonuclear fury is instantaneous. The sun crests the jagged, dead horizon like an exploding stellar bomb. The light hits the interior of your cabin with a physical, violent force. Your pupils dilated to their absolute maximum limit after 350 hours of total darkness are instantly seared by the unfiltered apocalyptic glare of a naked star. It is a blinding, agonizing flash of pure white radiation that forces you to squeeze your eyes shut and bury your face in your freezing, trembling hands. But the catastrophic assault of the lunar dawn is not merely visual. The true devastating horror is thermodynamic. For 2 excruciating weeks, the titanium hull of your habitat has been plunged into a deep freeze of minus 130 degrees Celsius. The metals have shrunk, the crystalline structures have become brittle. The broken emergency valve resting on the floor is a permanent testament to the merciless power of that cold. But the instant that blinding, unfiltered sunlight strikes the exterior shielding of the module, the temperature does not just warm up. It skyrockets with a terrifying, uncontrollable velocity. Within mere hours, the exterior of the hull will violently swing from negative 130 degrees to a blistering, boiling positive 120 degrees Celsius. You are lying on the floor gasping for the thick, toxic air when the symphony of destruction begins all over again. During the long night, you listen to the terrifying gunshot cracks of the metal contracting. Now you must listen to the agonizing, tearing screams of the metal violently expanding. The massive thermal shock sends catastrophic stress waves rippling through the already weakened bulkheads. Every single weld, every single microscopic stress fracture created by the deep freeze is now being brutally pulled in the exact opposite direction. The structural groans are louder, deeper, and far more chaotic than before. The habitat sounds like a dying metallic beast being slowly torn apart by an invisible giant. You thought the dawn would bring salvation. You thought the sunlight would hit the frozen solar arrays instantly, recharge your dead batteries, and restart the glorious hum of your life support systems. But technology does not survive a 250-degree temperature swing unscathed. The delicate silicon wafers of the solar panels, frozen brittle for weeks, are now being subjected to a rapid blistering expansion. Microscopic connections shatter. Conductive pathways warp and break. The power does not magically return. The air scrubbers permanently jammed with the abrasive glass like regolith dust remain completely silent. The broken oxygen valve cannot be magically repaired by the sunlight. The glorious life-giving sun is doing absolutely nothing but baking you alive inside a shattered, suffocating metal coffin. Your lungs burning with carbon dioxide toxicity now have to cope with the rapidly heating stagnant air. The sweat that was frozen to your brow just moments ago now begins to melt, stinging your eyes, mixing with the metallic dust that coats every surface of the cabin. This is the moment the true inescapable horror of the lunar environment completely breaks your spirit. You realize that you are not an explorer conquering a new frontier. You are a microscopic, fragile insect trapped on the surface of a pendulum, swinging violently between 2 absolute extremes of physics. There is no middle ground. There is no temperate zone. You are either freezing in the dark or boiling in the light. The cycle will simply repeat itself until the structural integrity of the module finally gives way, or your biological heart simply stops beating from the sheer overwhelming stress of existing in a place that actively demands your death. The psychological relief you expected from the dawn instantly evaporates, replaced by a crushing, profound despair. You survived the longest night in human history, only to realize that the day is just another executioner wearing a different mask. You are an ant desperately climbing to the top of an hourglass, only to realize the glass has just been violently flipped upside down. As the temperature inside the cabin rapidly begins to climb, shifting from a freezing tomb to a suffocating oven. The grand, majestic illusions of human space exploration dissolve entirely into the blood-stained, dusty reality of mere survival. We built magnificent rockets, we mapped the stars, and we wrote beautiful, inspiring poetry about leaving our earthly cradle. But the universe does not read our poetry. It does not care about our flags or our footprints. It operates on a scale of cold, hard thermodynamics and lethal radiation. A scale where human biology is nothing more than a temporary, fragile anomaly. Looking up at the moon from the safety of Earth tonight, do not let its soft silver glow deceive you. Do not see it as a romantic beacon or a stepping stone to a galactic empire. See it for what it truly is. It is a colossal silent tombstone orbiting our planet. It is a magnificent desolate monument to the absolute hostility of the cosmos. It stands as a constant looming reminder that the Earth, with its thick, breathable atmosphere and its protective magnetic embrace, is the only warm sanctuary we have ever known in an ocean of infinite freezing violence. When you step out of that warm embrace, the universe does not welcome you. It instantly begins the methodical, ruthless process of erasing you. The price of our cosmic arrogance is paid in freezing, blood-shattered metal and the absolute certainty that we were never meant to leave home. But if you believe the moon is the ultimate prison, you are gravely mistaken. The moon is merely the antechamber of hell. Mars, the glittering red jewel of our sci-fi fantasies, the so-called promised land of our future, is actually a radioactive slaughterhouse hiding behind a veil of toxic dust storms. Next week, we are going to violently tear away the romantic illusions of the Martian dream and expose the horrifying, lethal reality of the red planet. It is a truth so terrifying it will make you beg to stay on Earth forever. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel right now. You absolutely do not want to miss this nightmare.